Hi guys, welcome back to my channel Lush Foliage. A lot of times people tend to ask me this question on Instagram whether I tend to prepare soil mix in bulk or I tend to make it in a very small amount, because a lot of times you might have seen I tend to share an image of the yellow container with a soil mix, and it tends to look like I tend to make a small little batch for every plant. Now guys, that's not the case. I tend to make a bulk mix. Here as you can see, this is coco peat, and here is some of my garden soil which is almost empty right now. I usually tend to fill it in and around my place whenever there is some construction work going on, or if they're digging any bore well. I tend to collect this garden soil and I tend to store it in this container. I do not mix the entire garden soil in coco peat because a lot of times there are certain plants that do not like coco peat, like snake plants, or if I'm using it for water lilies or for succulents and cacti, I cannot use a soil that has coco peat in it. So I tend to keep a large amount of soil separate in one of the container over here, and in another container I only happen to keep coco peat, and this is where I tend to make my foliage mix by adding in the garden soil, perlite, sand, and a little bit of activated charcoal. I mix everything and I will show it to you in the later part of the video. As I spoke about the soil, I do not buy soil from the nursery, because last time when I purchased some soil from the nursery, it was around 20 kgs, and when I got it home I realized that there were a lot of rocks and there was very little soil. In order to increase the weight, they had put in a lot of rocks, so I stopped buying soil from the nursery and I just pick it up from around the area wherever there is digging going on. And coco peat, as usual, I tend to purchase it from TrustBasket. And then I have 100 grams of perlite. I usually use around 2 to 3 packets of 100 grams. It works out really well. Apart from that, the soil, I have already put it into this bucket because I did not have a lot of soil. So I use around 14 to 15 buckets like this, the smaller buckets. I use around 15 buckets of this garden soil. And then sand as well, I use around 2 to 3 buckets of the sand. Now unfortunately I went to the aquarium shop, but the sand was not available, so I'm just using grey sand. It is going to work equally same as how you tend to use the aquarium sand, but in this video I will only be using very little because I still want to keep the sand aside. Garden soil, I will add it later on. Right now, just for an example, I'll give you a quick idea of how I tend to mix all of these ingredients, but the quantity is going to be more, around 15 buckets of the garden soil and 3 to 4 buckets of sand. This is how I usually tend to use both. And over here I have some activated charcoal. It does look like DAP, it does look like NPK granules, but I do not use any of these chemicals. I only tend to use compost tea. The activated charcoal will remove toxins from the soil. If there is any smell in the soil from compost tea, the activated charcoal tends to remove all of this. Now guys, I usually tend to store a lot of soil mix. I know a lot of you guys might not have place, but it's always better to have a bulk soil mix in advance, especially when you're buying plants. Do not first buy plants and then start preparing the soil mix. Otherwise, just like in my case, I went to the shop to buy the aquarium sand. It was not available. I opened the drum and I checked and I realized that I don't have garden soil. So luckily that I checked and I was able to prepare. So it's always better, before you buy plants, ensure that you have already made your mix and kept ready. Now over here, this is the mix that I will start making. I will be adding a little bit of garden soil. Now I do not dump all the garden soil in one time. Like as I said, 15 buckets. I do not put all the 15 buckets in one go. I do this slowly and gradually, because if I'm going to dump everything in one go, it will be very difficult to mix because the soil is very dense. It will be very difficult to move around. After that, I add sand, probably 1 bucket or 2 bucket. And then after that I add in a little bit of the activated charcoal. Even the activated charcoal, I use around 3 cups. The size that I showed, I use only 3 cups, not more, because if you're going to use more, the soil will become very alkaline. We do not want to make the soil mix alkaline, because most of the plants prefer slightly acidic or neutral soil. So we do not want to make the soil mix very alkaline by adding in too much of activated charcoal. After this, I will put in the 100 grams of perlite. Now guys, remember,
throughout this process you have to ensure that you're using a face mask, because the dust that you're seeing is coming out from this. It's very dangerous to breathe, so ensure that you are using a mask while you're mixing all of this soil mix. Whether it's a garden soil, whether it's perlite, pumice, it's always better to use a mask. And once I have put in the content, ideally I put in 2 or 3 packets altogether. Today I'm just showing you a very small example. So this is how I will be mixing, and you can see the soil mix is already starting to form. It will take some time. I did not have much of soil mix, so right now it's almost 40% ready. So I will be adding more of garden soil, more of sand, and more of the activated charcoal. This is only the second container of activated charcoal. After this I will add another one, and that's all about it. I won't be adding any more of activated charcoal. So as you can see, the soil mix is almost prepared. You can see it's very fluffy, very loose, very porous. And as I said, the soil mix is not ready yet. I still have to add some more of the soil, some more of the sand, and I will do this gradually, because in one day to mix everything, it is very difficult. Your hands start to ache after a while, so I do not do it on the same day. It takes around 1 week, and you can also see the container is also very big, so it requires a lot of material, and then keep mixing it takes a lot of time. So ideally within a week or so, I keep adding a little bit of sand and soil, and gradually the soil mix starts to form. Now this soil mix tends to work out. It comes handy for at least couple of months, because I tend to use very small pots. So I so wish I could have held the soil and shown it to you how loose and porous it is, but I do not have my gloves on, and I do not want to touch the soil mix, because as I said, I have picked up this soil from the roadside, so there could be a lot of things in it, so I do not want to touch it with my bare hand. So that's all about it. As you can see, this is how I tend to prepare my bulk soil mix for my foliage plants. For the plants that prefer slight amount of moisture, like caletheas, monsteras, anthuriums, philodendrons, pothos, even the flowering plants, I tend to use the same soil mix, so I tend to make it in bulk. Now I will be purchasing a lot of new plants probably after the first week of March, and by then this soil mix is also going to be ready. So that's why I was preparing a large batch of soil mix, because there will be a lot of new plants coming in, and by then this soil mix will also be ready. So guys, that's all about it. I hope that this video was helpful to you. If it was, please hit the like button, and if you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing to it. Until then, take care, stay safe, and keep planting.